Welcome to Art in the AM. I am Jamie, and this is Art in the AM with the ABCs of art. And today is the letter D, if you've been following along, and this is round 2 of the ABCs of art. So I've already done A through Z, and now I'm starting on the second round, and we're up to the letter D. And when I chose this word for the letter D, I had a different idea of probably what I was going to talk about. And then I realized that I had kind of talked about design a little bit last year. So last year I was working in this, I guess it's a watercolor journal also, and it has like a really nice cover, and it has, the little elastic. I feel like maybe it has pockets. I think it came in a set of 2, and I actually do believe that I added this particular watercolor journal to my Amazon shop, and it came in a package of 2. And I really liked working on this one, and I kind of liked the long, how it opened up kind of vertically like this or horizontally like this, and I could have like this whole space. And what I did last year was I did the artwork on the front, and then I wrote about it. I had a word last year. It was the word of the week. I think that's what I called it last year. So I had the word, and I had the definition, and I had maybe what color related to it. I had some different examples and sometimes a quote in there. So it was a lot of fun last year to just kind of choose these random words. And then this year I decided to do more of the ABCs of art and kind of have, a logical order to them. But what I remembered was I talked about the elements of design last year. And what I'm going to do today is I have in my journal, which I'm going to turn my camera around so you can see what I have in my journal today, but I'm going to show you the pages that I did last year that go with each one of the elements. So even though we're doing the letter D, these are the elements of design, or actually when I taught this at the high school level, when I was a high school teacher, I actually called them the elements of art. I think they're probably called both elements of art or elements of design. But the elements of art really are that. They are the elements. They are the foundation. They are the key things that if you can have an understanding of these things, you're gonna create better art. You're going to create things that are harmonious. You're going to create things with intention. They're just going to be better because these are, if you will, kind of the rules of art. Not necessarily the rules, but they're like the guidelines to follow. And then once you know the guidelines, then you can intentionally break the guidelines, which is totally different than if you just don't know them and you do something that, doesn't follow the guidelines, but you're not doing it with intention. Like there are so many artists who go against what is the normal at the time. They go against what is considered, acceptable. And that really is how we know a lot of them, because they did something that was so different than at the time. But they knew the foundation, they knew the elements, they knew the basics of design and the elements of art. So in my journal, I have covered up the words. And as you are watching, I want you to see if you can guess, if you can figure out what the elements of art are before I uncover them. So I have them all covered up. So I'm going to switch my camera around, which takes me a second because I have to physically like turn it around, or well, hit the button to turn it around. And then that way you'll be able to see kind of down on my table, and I'm going to uncover the words as I go through them. I am curious if you are watching live on the replay, however you're watching, when you're watching, if you know how many elements there are. How many of these elements, this foundation, these basics of art are there? You've probably heard me talk about it. You may know from somewhere else. How many elements of art are there? So you can go ahead and be typing that in so you're not watching me spin around my camera, especially if you get like dizzy from, I can't watch that, like all that moving around like that. So I'm going to switch my camera around so you can then see my table. And hi there, Kathy. And I have the elements of design, and I'll put it a little bit higher up here on the screen. So how many of the elements of design are there? If you guessed all of these little pieces of paper that there were 7, you are correct. There are 7 elements of design, 7 principles, 7 things that if you have a better understanding of each one of these and how to use them and how to be really a master of each one of these different elements, your art will be better. Your art will be more harmonious. Like I said, it'll look like you know what you're doing. That's how it is. So these are the elements of design, which is our word today. So I'm going to uncover the first one, which is probably the most basic of all of the elements. It's like the very first thing that you start with when you are young and you are picking up a pencil, a crayon, whatever it might be. It's the most fundamental element. And it is really, it's the one that makes up all kinds of different art in a lot of different ways. So the most basic one, my words are really, really tiny underneath these little flags. It's line. So when I talk about line, it's really, I remember this book. Well, I think it was a book, but I remember the little cartoon. It was probably like back in the 70s. And it was about when a dot becomes a line. And really I think of, when I think about a line, that's what it is. It's a dot that goes for a walk is how I used to teach like to elementary kids. It's a line that's created from that dot that moves, but it guides your eye through artwork. And there can be straight lines and curved lines and squiggly lines and curlicue lines and all those different types of lines. If you do any kind of doodling, you're doing different lines, right? You're just creating with just I love using just my ultra fine Sharpie and just doing different types of lines. And once you have a line and you connect that line, you enclose that line and you connect it to itself, then you create the next element, which is shape. So the next element is shape. And shape is really just when you connect a line, right? It's when you have that line come back around and meet itself. And there are 2 different types of line. And let me see if I had, or 2 different types of shape. I have this here. So this was the page that I created last year about shapes. There are geometric shapes that have all straight edges, and there are organic shapes that are all curved edges. And everything really is made up of these 2 different kinds of shapes. And you can break down even something like a face, even something like a body, a hand, things that you feel like are very complex and could be complicated to draw. You can break them down into shapes and start to see things either in geometric or organic shapes. So you can even start to see with just two elements, just line and shape, that is the foundation of any kind of drawing, any kind of, oh, we uncovered one right there because my little Post-it notes are not super sticky, so they're not staying stuck on there. But line and shape, really, if you start to understand those and you understand how you can put different shapes together, you can draw anything. You can look at something and break it down into the most simple organic and geometric shapes and have a better understanding of how things are put together. So many different artists take a figure and they break it down and they study even animals and birds, and they break it down into the different organic and geometric shapes to see how, there are artists who have sketchbooks that's all that it is shapes and put together. So I could go on and on just about those two. But the next one starts to bring all of that together, and that is form. So form is three-dimensional. It has depth, volume, height, or at least makes it look three-dimensional. So when I think about form, I think about three-dimensional shapes. I think about a circle, right, which is an organic shape here. And by shading it, by having different values, which is one of the other elements that we'll talk about, you can make it look three-dimensional. You can make it look like it has dimension, like it has form. So a two-dimensional is a shape, but then 3 dimensions is the form. The next one I kind of had uncovered there. This could be an entire year that I could teach you about all the things about color. And really, to master color is one of the, probably like a lifelong thing of an artist, just to be a master of how colors come together. And I'm looking at, let's see, where I have, oh, here's color. How it all comes together. And this is a really fun one that I did last year. It was probably one of my favorite pages last year. And if you have seen me doing my scrap rolls of putting scraps onto a roll of duct tape, where'd my roll over here. So my roll of duct tape where I've been putting the scraps, it was pretty much the same concept that I did for this one. I just kind of controlled the colors. So I put all the reds and all the purples and, and I just made all the colors. So it kind of made like a, kind of like a color wheel, color strand, of all the different colors on there. And then I added it to this page and I just covered it with some packing tape, to just hold it all down into there. And color, when I did some of the information like on the back of this one, it's an element that is how the eye sees light, and it reflects, and how it comes together to reflect off of an object. So it can have value, which we talked about with the three-dimensional, with the form. It has intensity, which is like how saturated it is. There's so much about color and color theory and color mixing and all of the things. Color is something as an artist that you just keep practicing, that you just keep learning more about. And even when you start painting, it'll depend on what brand of paint and how you mix colors together and color, side by side, how it changes. And I took an entire quarter of just color. Like that was what the class was called in college. And we learned all about color theory and all of those different things. And I have never painted so many swatches of colors, like all different colors and mixing colors. And it really gave me a better understanding of color. The next one is value. And value I talked about with the shading that you do to create a form, you use different values. I talk about value so much when I talk about contrast. You have to have light values and dark values. In a painting, if everything looks very flat and you want it to look more three-dimensional and have more form, it probably means that you need a light value or more light values, and you need more dark values. One of the very last things that I've been doing in my portraits is that I usually add white in a couple of places, or at least a brighter, lighter value, and I add just a few places of dark values, the darkest values. Usually that's black. So I think about, extremes between black and white. So last year I actually did a grayscale. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, an 8-step grayscale. So I have the white and I have the black. And then I did a value scale with a color. And to know when you mix white with a color and when you mix black with a color, what that does and the different values that you can get with that color, especially yellow. There are so many different yellow paints that when you mix black with them, because black is kind of a mixture and it depends on the brand name there. When you mix it with yellow, sometimes you'll get green. Sometimes you'll get like a brown. And it's really interesting, especially with the yellow. So I chose purple here and just showing, and I think this was actually a metallic purple. So I didn't get like a nice intense value of the purple because it was metallic in there. And it's just the type of paint that I used. Look, I uncovered these last two here. So we'll just uncover both of those. This one, texture, is probably something that once I got more familiar with these 5 elements, texture became something that I was really, it added so much more interest. I really became fascinated with different kinds of texture. And I think that was what really led me more to do mixed media, is the texture. So last year when I talked about texture, I talked about the 4 different kinds. So you have actual texture, which you can feel, right? I used different things to create these textures and I can feel the texture on there. So, there's modeling paste that you can use, and I've used spackle before, and just different things to create an actual texture. There's an implied texture that, I can kind of see that there's texture, but it's not raised up. There's texture by the way that the brush went on there. Then there's like this abstract sense of texture in how this was made almost to look like wood, which is just like an odd combination with the owl there, but it's giving you like a sense of texture, usually by the way that you put other elements together, the line and, shapes and things together. And then just an invented texture where you kind of like make that up, which I did kind of like with the plaid on there, just creating like these lines, and then this dry brush kind of with the heart there. So the texture is something that, especially with layering, that I love to do with the texture. And then the last thing is space. And it's so interesting to me with space. Space is all of the area on your, we'll say, paper, your composition, your canvas, whatever the shape is that you're painting or creating on. But it's also like the space around and inside and between and all of those positive spaces, which are the object that you're creating, your focal point, and all of the space like around it. And as a kid, when you're first drawing, first coloring, you have this natural ability to fill the space. Like if you are given a big piece of paper, you're going to draw big and fill up that whole big space. And there's something that's so interesting that happens as we get older, 9, 10, 11, and we get so focused on the focal point, the thing that we're drawing, and we want to make it look more realistic and we want it to be more detailed. We focus so much on the actual object that we kind of forget about the space, and we end up drawing something really, really small, even when we have this whole big sheet of paper. And for that reason, I feel like space is something, it has to be intentional. You have to think about the space and how it fills up the space. I feel like there was a flower that I did recently, and instead of drawing the flower and having, all the space around there, I kind of blew it up and had it, come out to the edges. And it just created this like much more dynamic flower because I thought about the space and I thought about how it was going to fill up the space. That's not to say that you can't have compositions, which we talked about last week. You can't have compositions that have small things in there, but you have to do it intentionally. You have to think about the space, use these other different elements to have everything come together so that your eye is being drawn to whatever that, maybe smaller little thing is. We talked last week about a house in a painting that I'm familiar with, that it's kind of small, but your eye leads, the hill and the fence and everything, it leads to that house, which is the focal point. But the space around it was thought about. It wasn't that this house was just kind of like floating over there. The rest of the space was thought about around it. So these are the 7 elements of design. And I would just encourage you, if you don't know much about how to use, especially color, if you don't know much about that, start watching some videos specifically about color. Be intentional about what it is that you want to learn. Don't just watch a tutorial about how to paint an owl. I have an owl that I'm looking at over here, and just copy what the teacher is showing. You want to learn about why they're mixing the red, the blue, and the yellow to make the brown of the owl. And that's learning about color and how colors work together, and learning about why they chose, the background to be a cool color versus the owl, which is warm colors. The more that you know about any of these elements, especially color, because there's so much to learn in there, the more that you're going to have success with your artwork, the more that you're going to feel like it works, the more that you're going to feel like it is, like I said, harmonious, it is complete, it is what you're trying to get across. The more that you know about these, the more that you can learn about them, the more that you can use them, the more that you practice with them, the better that you're going to get. So that is about the elements of design for the letter D. And remember, if you want to watch any of the videos from this series that I'm doing of the ABCs of Art, You can watch on YouTube. That's probably the easiest way to watch all of them. And if you want to go back and see the videos for this journal where I did the words each week, and I called them, this was another one that I really liked, I called it the word of the week. You can go, I really like this one too with Martin Luther King that I painted upside down. And you can go to YouTube and see that on the playlist. And you can be able to watch all of the videos from last year where I chose the word and would just do a little artwork related to the word, and then I would have, you know, the definition and the color and usually a quote on the back there. So all of those videos are also on my YouTube. If you're not already subscribing over there, just put YouTube in the comments of this video, and I will make sure and put that link over there because it is listed underneath my name instead of my business name. So it does not match my business name here on Facebook to be able to find it on it. Probably if you searched it, you would probably be able to find it underneath my business name, but it's listed underneath my personal name over there. So you can put YouTube in the comments and I will make sure you get that link to follow over there. And I will be back next week for the letter E and have another word for you to be able to just have a better understanding of words related to art that will help you to be a better artist, to create better, and to have just a better understanding, because that is what I love seeing, people who understand art better and become better artists because of it. So that is my hope, and I will leave you with that until next week at 10:30 a.m. Eastern for the letter E.